So we're all on that finals week kind of momentum, right? We're all trying to rush all our assignments. We're trying to write out all our essays. We're trying to practice all our speeches. And it's getting us stressed out. It's really making us feel getting like we're gonna get worried, we're gonna fail and stuff. And my friend saw this in me. He gave me a simple advice. He said, you know what, just sit down, relax, and burn it down, you know? Use marijuana to calm yourselves and just, you know, take a breather, take a moment, you know? But I look into this further and I say, you know what, no. Marijuana should only be strictly for medical reasons, and recreational marijuana should not be legal at all. And today I'm going to tell you guys that there's actual uses for medical marijuana, and I'm going to disprove two arguments that many pro-legalization of marijuana advocates promote. So, first off, the medical marijuana. It actually helps. Why get rid of something that actually helps people? In a article by Washington Post, they did a survey with 7,500 people, and 92% of them claimed that their symptoms of chronic pain, cancer, nausea, and migraines have been relieved. That's an astounding amount of people who had symptoms that are now cured, basically. These other institutions like the National Institute of Drug Addiction even says that medical marijuana can be used for medicinal purposes. They can be turned into medicine called cannabinoids. Cannabinoids are they take the main ingredient of marijuana, which is THC, and condenses it down to its actual use. It reduces seizures, nausea, involuntary muscle movements, and it calms people down. That could be very helpful for kids that have epilepsy or any other or adults that have schizophrenia. It's also proven, or it's also being tested right now for the possibility of curing cancer. Now, I don't know about you guys, but I've lost a lot of relatives to cancer, and what if we're able to stop that? I think that would be very great. And last thing about these medicines, cannabinoids are a little bit more susceptible from being abused by users because it's not as intoxicating as it is for the actual plant itself. Now, going on, some advocates say that marijuana is harmless. That's one of their arguments, and I'm going to disprove that because there's actual claims of harms that have been developing in pot smokers. The CDC claims that there are that the intoxication of marijuana interferes with the brain system, and it dulls down our motor skills and brings down our alertness. And also, the National Institute for Drug Abuse also claims that this drug, along with the CDC, list a lot of symptoms such as short-term symptoms are memory impairment, slowness in learning, alertness in reduction in alertness, and mood swings. Long-term effects can be loss in IQ, loss in memory, lung and heart problems, as well as childhood development when pregnant mothers are smoking. The next argument that people claim to use for advocating recreational marijuana is that if it does become legal, it can be taxed, it can be regulated, and it can be beneficial for the state. I say, why don't you just slap a huge fine for it every time people do drunk driving, or everyone convict murderers with high payments for their bail. I think that can generate a lot of revenue as well for California. We don't even have to legalize anything that's dangerous. There are over millions of people getting pulled over each year. 2014, the FBI reported over 2 million people getting pulled over for driving under the influence of alcohol and narcotics. Now, imagine if we raise up the fines for that. I think that can raise a whole bunch more money than just using marijuana as a way to tax people, the same way as California right now is taxing cigarettes. So my question is to you guys, why would you legalize something that's dangerous in the benefit of just us creating more money? And I personally believe that it should be our main focus is our health and wellness. So, in conclusion, I told you guys about the health benefits regarding marijuana as medicinal purposes, and then I disproved the two arguments, which are that it was harmless and that it would be beneficial. I hope you guys can see that marijuana can actually be the medicine of the future, but it shouldn't be it shouldn't be our coping mechanism. There's a lot more ways that we can handle finals. Like you want to hug a dog, or like Daniela, she maybe want to have a beer. Other things we can cope with, we can just do. It could be more healthier for us. It's more beneficial, advantageous. But marijuana doesn't seem likely. So, with that being said, I hope you guys have good luck with your finals, good luck with your essays, and thank you very much. Was that quick? Good job.
All right. It's a little complicated because you have two different arguments that you're making here. One is that there is a value to having medical marijuana available, so you're making a claim of fact about its potential benefits. But there's also an argument that says legalization is unnecessary for recreational purposes because of potential dangers, and that we don't really need the revenue that's going on there. So it's well organized, at least when it comes to being able to identify what the supporting points are, but it really feels a little bit like it's two different subjects that are being forced together, and not in a good way like peanut butter and chocolate and Reese's peanut butter cups, but like in a bad way, with onions and chocolate. It's like, why are we doing these two things? If we were looking at this again, I would suggest that you could maybe make an acknowledgement about the medical issue as part of a general argument against legalizing for recreational purposes, just as kind of background argument, and say, look, I understand that there are legitimate uses for marijuana for medical purposes, and as long as we've got a way to regulate that and control that, but keep it for people who really need it, that's fine. But there's a vast difference between that and allowing anybody who needs to relax before class, who wants a 4:20 break at the end of their long day, who is trying to cope with the stress of their life, to be able to freely do so, and then supposedly we're going to get benefits from it by taxing people. That I see as being a problem, because there are really negative consequences to doing that. That's kind of the way I think you'd want to present the argument. Like I said, because you spend so much time on the first part talking about medical marijuana benefits, it almost, you used the term, you talked about schizophrenic, it almost feels schizophrenic in terms of where it is you're going with the subject. The medical marijuana stuff I thought was okay information. If you're going to make that argument, I think you need to be a little bit sharper about some of the data that you've got. That, the Washington Post didn't conduct a study. They might be reporting on a study that happened concerning marijuana use, and it seems very generic in the way it's being presented. So if there's a more specific quote that you could get, I think that would be helpful. You talked about a lot of uses, that it would have seizures, nausea, calming effects, that sort of thing. You mentioned schizophrenia. This is a second reference to schizophrenia in this speech. And you know what? I'm a little at odds with this, because this is one of the things that I thought was going to come up as a negative, because that's one of the things that I've heard and have read research on that says that some people have the exact opposite reaction. When people say marijuana has no negative effect, but it has a negative effect for some people, and the schizophrenia is one of those things that has that. And here you're telling me it's actually kind of a cure for schizophrenia. I'm going, well, what's the proof on that? And I don't really get much proof on that. I get an assertion. So it kind of creates this distance between my previous knowledge and experience and what you're saying, and I think I need more information over here. Now, I'm not throwing out what you're saying completely, but it's an assertion at this point, and as I've told you before, this is part of the problem. I don't know what the rest of the audience feels like, and you're doing an audience analysis, but don't forget that I'm sitting here and I'm part of your audience too, and I think I've told you, I've heard these speeches for 35 years, so I've heard a lot of stuff about this particular stuff. I'm not saying that means you have to do everything, but you got to be pretty complete when you're making an argument like this. The tax issue I just thought was underdeveloped. You've got this, it feels like you're going in another direction. Well, why don't we just tax people for drunk driving? Well, we do. The fines are pretty stiff on that. I don't want to ask anybody in here, but I'll bet there are probably some people in the class who have been arrested for drunk driving and can tell you exactly how much money it costs them, because it ain't cheap. Now, if you want to double that for people who are arrested for DUI, whether they're under the influence of alcohol or marijuana or something like that, that's perfectly fine. But then you need to show us that that would address the issue more than legalizing it for tax purposes. I think there's a better argument to be made that says, look, there are plenty of other ways that we can get tax revenue rather than thriving on people's weaknesses. And that's basically what these sin taxes are. Whether it's a tax on alcohol, a tax on cigarettes, or a tax on legalized marijuana, we're saying, okay, let's take advantage of people's weaknesses and use that to fund the state. I think that there's a good argument to be made that says we should be a little bit more reliable on the kinds of things that we tax, that there should be a practical value to it. Make that argument. As it is, it just feels like this is a side issue that's not really relevant to the point that you're talking about. Like I said, it's well organized. There's some information on the second point that talks about the potential dangers, and you cite that. I think you could be a little bit more specific in some of that information. And also, if you want to get people to be emotionally involved, give us some examples of people who've had problems with marijuana use. People say, nobody has problems. And then you say, here are 3 people that can tell you how their lives were ruined by their marijuana use. Here's one person who's had this negative effect that you're talking about, long-term loss of short-term memory, or short-term loss of long-term memory, or they just can't remember anything. Let's get an example here and tell us that story and make it emotionally involving. So I think there's more that you can do here. Presentation-wise, I know you've got the notes on the side. It's basically an outline you're jumping to occasionally to remind you what's going on. I didn't find that too problematic. The thing that's a little bit problematic is that you kind of have a little circle that you do on the ground. It's like I look over there, come around, do the circle back, and then I circle back to my notes over here, and that seems a little awkward as a speaker. Your pacing is a little bit awkward also, because I think you're thinking and then you're coming back, and you're thinking about coming back instead of just talking to us. And so it needs to be a little bit quicker, a little bit more energetic. And like I said, I think you're missing some opportunities for some emotional connection on some of the subjects that you're talking about, and that's something that you ought to be taking advantage of. I thought you had a very good preview, an excellent summary of what you were talking about at the end, and you kind of make your point at the end. So you're doing the right kinds of things, like the technical stuff on organization and previewing and summaries. You're fine. All right. Now we just have to think out the content a little bit more, so it's a little more coherent. That's the thing that's problematic here. Not the technical stuff, but the content issues. All right. Thank you.